Imagine this. You are a woman in the 15th century. You live in a village, collect herbs, treat children, and help your neighbors. And suddenly, everything ends. You are accused of witchcraft. Life changes instantly. Women were subjected to the harshest tortures to get confessions, the potential punishment, execution. To identify witches, there was a special handbook, a kind of desk book for inquisitors. The book Malleus Maleficarum explained in detail how to recognize a witch, how to interrogate and torture her, so that the devil, who supposedly held her tongue, would let her speak. The most frightening thing, all this was considered legal and holy. One document could condemn a woman to death. A neighbor's denunciation or an accident was already treated as proof of guilt. According to the Malleus Maleficarum, women were burned, drowned, and executed by thousands. History seems far away, but if you think about it, this was a time when people were already printing books, studying medicine and law, universities were opening all over Europe, and yet people continued to believe that disease, crop failure, or a child's death was the work of a witch. The Dominican monk and inquisitor Heinrich Kremer began a high-profile trial in Innsbruck in 1485. Women were accused of witchcraft, making a pact with the devil, and causing harm to people and livestock. The interrogations were very harsh. Confessions were forced under pressure, and conclusions were decided beforehand. However, local judges, after reviewing the materials, doubted its legality. Testimonies looked coerced, accusations poorly founded. The Bishop of Innsbruck, Georg Golser, intervened personally. He overturned the sentences, freed the accused women, and effectively forbade Kramer from continuing the trial. Moreover, the inquisitor was directly told to leave the city. It is important to note that the sentences were cancelled not because they did not believe in witchcraft, but because Kramer's methods were considered excessive and legally weak. This failure was a personal and professional humiliation for Kramer. It was after this that he wrote Malleus Maleficarum, as a guide so that next time judges would have no doubts. Kramer always acted much more aggressively than most colleagues. Even before he had conflicts with secular and church authorities, he was accused of exceeding powers, legal negligence, and obsessive efforts to push trials toward execution. He was convinced that the church treated the threat of witchcraft too softly. In complaints to Rome, Kramer wrote that bishops and judges do not understand the scale of danger and prevent the inquisitor from doing his duty. Although the book was published under two names, the main and practically the only author was Heinrich Kramer. Modern historians agree that Jacob Sprenger's contribution was minimal or formal. His name was added to strengthen the text's authority. Kramer's ideas included: witchcraft is not random superstition, but an organized conspiracy. Women are supposedly more prone to witchcraft due to weakness of mind and body. Quotes from Aristotle and church fathers were used selectively. Detailed descriptions of Sabbaths, pacts with the devil, and sexual relations between witches and demons. Logic where denial of guilt was considered proof of guilt. Torture is justified as a permissible and necessary method. Advice on how to bypass laws if judges doubt. It is important to understand, Malleus Maleficarum is not a theological work, but a practical guide written by someone already stopped by courts. It was created as a form of resistance to the system. Contents of the book. The text of Malleus Maleficarum is built on open hatred toward women. Its authors believed that women are naturally corrupt, weaker in body and spirit, more prone to sin, lust, and disbelief, and therefore more easily influenced by the devil. Women were presented as the source of evil and all human misfortune. The authors even invented a false explanation for the word femina, deriving it from the Latin words fides, faith, and minus less, meaning she who has less faith. In their logic, women were guilty of everything, from the expulsion from paradise to wars, diseases, and the fall of civilizations. Men, meanwhile, were described as victims of female cunning and magic. The book divides the world into two opposites: good and evil, God and the devil, Mary and Eve. Men symbolize good, women, evil. Authors claimed that most women would sooner or later become witches, and the only way to avoid it was to renounce sexuality and go to a monastery. Male witches are also mentioned, but they were assigned different motives: the desire for power and knowledge. Women, however, were accused of disbelief and looseness. Historians note that usually, not just women were accused, but those who were independent, strong-willed, or stepped outside traditional female roles. Men made up about a quarter of all the accused. The book describes inquisitorial practices in detail: how to spot devil's marks, how to interrogate and get confessions. It is divided into 3 parts, each written as question and answer. Why witchcraft is the worst crime. Abandoning Christian faith and making a pact with the devil. Types of evil deeds of witches and ways to fight them. Instructions for courts. How to start a case, break the accused, and bring the trial to verdict. Reaction of church, courts, and educated circles. The book, published in 1487, was seen by many theologians and lawyers as too aggressive, legally weak, and full of the author's personal fears. Many church figures noticed that Kramer mixed theology with superstition, made too broad conclusions, and practically reduced any defense of the accused to a trick of the devil. Nevertheless, the book spread, mainly in Central and Northern Europe, especially German lands. Reasons were simple: weak central authority, many small courts, and high religious anxiety. Under these conditions, Malleus Maleficarum became a convenient tool. It showed how to accuse, justified torture, and claimed that refusal to admit guilt was itself proof of guilt. Europe, at the time, was going through religious wars, the Reformation, epidemics, and social crises. The book appeared when people needed a simple enemy and a simple explanation for evil. Printing also helped its influence. Mass printing was growing, and the treatise spread quickly, amplifying fear and suspicion. It did not create the witch hunts from scratch, but acted as a catalyst. Financial motives also mattered. For example, in Offenburg in 1628, it was announced that each named witch would earn 2 shillings. Immediately, mass accusations began. In England in 1645, the self-proclaimed witch hunter, Matthew Hopkins, earned £1 per witch, plus funds for himself and his team. In a year, his income reached about £1,000. Chronicler Johann Linden in the History of Trier wrote, "The crowd's madness and judges' thirst for blood and gain went so far that no one remained untouched by suspicion." How to identify a witch according to Malleus Maleficarum. Any evil without a natural explanation, disease, death of livestock, crop failure, was automatically seen as the devil acting through a human. The court did not question the existence of witchcraft. It was taken as fact. The court's task was to find the guilty person. Special attention was given to women. Formerly, men could also be witches, but women were seen as weaker in spirit and body, and therefore more susceptible to the devil. Any quiet, intelligent, or emotional woman could be under suspicion, even without specific proof. Courts used several methods. First, they observed behavior. Calmness or fear was considered the devil's trick. Tears or complaints, deception. Next were testimonies from neighbors and acquaintances. Any rumor, denunciation, or conflict could be the basis for accusation. The accused often did not know who reported against her. Bodies were also carefully examined. They looked for devil's marks, scars, moles, lumps, or insensitivity to pain. Even a normal birthmark could be considered proof. If a needle did not cause pain, it was considered confirmation of a pact with the devil. Torture was allowed. Kramer argued that the devil prevented witches from telling the truth, so only through pain could confessions be obtained. Women were stretched on racks, hung with hands tied behind their backs, or had fingers squeezed in special devices. They could be deprived of sleep for several days and interrogated non-stop. Psychological torture was also used. Threats of execution, using children. People began to agree with any accusations just to stop the suffering. They described meetings with the devil, attending Sabbaths, and about other witches. The accused had to name alleged accomplices. Reasons a woman could be called a witch. She was quiet, too intelligent, or too modest. Neighbors pointed at her. She had a scar, mole, or lump on her skin. Another woman named her under torture. Imagine how it looked. Someone got sick, then another. Then a child died. People remembered a woman who had argued with someone from the deceased. She denied everything. That was already suspicious. So they helped the truth come out. After torture, she confessed to getting the power to send diseases from a demon, knowing secret words and curses. No one tested water. No one looked for infection. No one asked why diseases spread across Europe. The woman was guilty. Kramer gives an example of a woman who supposedly stole men's strength. She visited homes at night and caused weakness and impotence to men neighbors. One man woke up feeling broken. His wife and relatives saw nothing. His words were enough for the court, which confirmed witchcraft. The accused stayed silent, and as we know, Kramer called silence proof of a pact with the devil. Again, No one searched for physical reasons. No one thought about stress, diseases, or injuries. Another story describes an old woman accused of cursing fields. Crops rotted, livestock got sick, and neighbors blamed her. Silence and strange behavior were considered proof of a pact with the devil. Even one such incident could destroy reputation, respect, and future. Most victims were in German lands, Switzerland, France, and Scotland. England suffered less. Italy and Spain almost did not know the fires. How people began to be suspected of witchcraft. Initially, the Inquisition was not a witch hunt. It was created to fight heretics, those who deviated from official Christian teachings and threatened faith. It started in the 2nd century. Bishops checked teachers and defended proper understanding of faith. The idea of orthodoxy, correct teaching, emerged, opposed to heresy, dangerous or false beliefs. In the 4th century, Theodosius the Great introduced the death penalty for wrong teachings, burning at the stake, observing faith, denunciations, all part of the system. In 1215, Pope Innocent III officially established the Inquisition. But in the popular mind, Inquisition is often associated with fighting witchcraft. First systematic accusations of witchcraft appeared in Europe around the 13th, 14th centuries. Why people were accused of witchcraft? There were several reasons, all creating a perfect storm of fear and suspicion. Social reasons. In small villages, everyone knew each other, and any quarrel or jealousy could become an accusation. Poor, old women, and lonely people were easy targets. Religious reasons. People believed the world was full of demons and evil forces. Any unusual behavior, strange signs, or knowledge of herbs was seen as a direct pact with the devil. Natural reasons. Crop failures, diseases, livestock deaths. People needed someone to blame. It was easiest to blame a witch. Any deviation from normal, any strangeness, a person could end up on the list. Fear hung in the air like fog after rain. People stopped trusting each other. Whispering became a weapon. A small quarrel could cost someone their life. Families were split. Husbands, wives, children. If someone was suspected, neighbors would avoid the entire family. Sometimes villages refused to buy or sell from suspects. How the hunt changed over time. In German principalities, persecutions were especially cruel. Some villages burned all women. The fight against witchcraft lasted several centuries, changing in form and intensity. The decline began in the 18th century. Court practices became stricter. Enlightened monarchs limited church courts. Society gradually rejected accusations of witchcraft. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, trials almost completely stopped. In Spain, France, and Latin America, they were abolished during reforms and independence wars. The last officially executed witch in Europe was Anna Geldi in Switzerland, 1782. She was a simple maid. The child she cared for became seriously ill, and Anna was accused of witchcraft. Formally, the sentence was poisoning. Unfortunately, this case repeated the logic of old witch hunts: rumors, fear, social vulnerability, and prejudice. Her execution became a symbol of the end of mass witchcraft accusations. Only in 2008 did the Swiss parliament officially recognize her as innocent. Anna Geldi was called a victim of judicial error. The witch hunts lasted about 500 years. There is no single answer why they ended. Most likely, it was a combination of reasons. Enlightenment ideas, growth of science, triumph of reason. Even before that, nobles and theologians opposed the hunts, but their voices were ignored. Around 1691, Protestant preacher Balthasar Becker sharply condemned colleagues for spreading mass hysteria. In 1704, Prussian lawyer and philosopher Christian Thomasius, in short theses on the sin of witchcraft, showed the absurdity of such trials. His authority at the court of Frederick I was high, and within 2 years accusations began to decrease. By the mid-18th century, the fires in Prussia finally went out, changing the image of the witch. Initially, old, poor women, disabled women, and servant women were suspects. As panic grew, accusers stopped noticing social class, age, or rank. Even school teachers, respected ladies, pastors, infants from noble families, and relatives of judges were burned. In this atmosphere, judges' zeal gradually declined. They began to doubt they could identify a real witch. In educated circles, believing in witchcraft became unfashionable and even shameful. Common people also gradually stopped fearing witches. Medical knowledge improved, social support got better, and people understood that illnesses or mental disorders could not be explained by witchcraft. Today, the phrase witch hunt is used when people are accused without real evidence, out of fear, convenience, or someone's gain. In the past, it ended with trials and executions. Now, with harassment, pressure, and ruined reputations. Forms have changed, but the essence remains the same. First, a guilty person is chosen, then explanations are forced to fit. The history of witch hunts shows how easily fear and suspicion replace reason, and why accusations without proof should always be treated with caution.